Welcome. Great to see the room is packed. We do have a few more seats up front here. The seats no one wants to sit in, but if you want to, you can definitely come sit down. We'll kick things off. Welcome. My name is Alex, and I used to be a developer, but I haven't written a single line of code since August last year. So today I'm going to talk to you about AI-assisted coding. Deliberately not using the word vibe coding. Let me start by saying I used to be a developer. I've been building a number of companies for many years, have a background in machine learning and pattern recognition. And I had sort of a 10-year hiatus from writing code. I was definitely building solutions, but I had a big team of developers. And then I got back into coding when the world had changed, sort of 2.5 years ago. And I had to sort of relearn how to write code, which I think was a benefit for me because a lot of my friends are developers and they've been very skeptical about AI and writing code. But I sort of didn't have any sort of set ways of writing code anymore, so I could sort of fully embrace it. But let me ask you, how many of you use AI? So now people will say, like, why didn't you not use AI? But it's right after lunch. I want you to sort of get the blood flow going, right? So how many of you have stopped writing code yourself? Yeah, a few. But the majority still write code. How many of you use Claude Code? Oh, surprisingly many, actually. And I guess a lot of you would maybe use Codex. Some of you, okay. And GitHub Copilot. Cool. And maybe some of you also use like AI chat to talk about code, but you still write the code. Yeah, okay, cool. Great. So in my talk, I'm going to talk about tips that I believe most of them are applicable no matter what tools or AI coding harnesses you use. They're applicable across, but some of the examples might be a bit Claude specific. So just a little fair warning, but the majority you can apply no matter what tools you use or coding agents you use. I think something really changed back in sort of October last year with the introduction of Opus. And I think it sort of changed from AI being capable of, autocomplete and, could do quite a bit of coding tasks to actually AI being able to write working code. Now, I know some people will still say, no, it can't write as good code as me, etc. But the models are progressing so fast. And I think, like my saying is, the models we use today are probably the worst models we're going to use for the rest of our lives. They're just moving with a pace that makes it a bit difficult for us to keep up. As I said, you can use whatever tools you have access to and follow along with the 10 tips that I'm going to go through. And I'm going to just have to admit that it's not actually 10 tips because there is so much to talk about. So I've sort of just crammed a lot of tips into 10 categories. So it'll be high-paced, starting with tip number 0. I think for those of you who have not yet started or are just getting started, still writing your own code, my biggest tip is actually about mindset, about thinking about how we actually start collaborating with AI, rather than thinking, let's just stop writing code. You should get comfortable with the level of quality that you can actually get out of your AI. So I think pair programming mindset is a good way to think about it. I think it's a big risk if you choose to use AI sort of in the lazy way, where we just sort of tell it to do something, we just ignore whatever it's coming out, we just accept it. If we do that over time, I think we are all going to get dumber. But that's a choice we have. And in particular, as developer, I think the time now is incredible because it has never been easier to learn new things if you actively choose to be in the loop, rather than just sort of run it on autopilot. So being able to actually invite AI to the table, not just give it the task and let it run, but actually ask it to explain, ask it to walk you through it. And to me, it's been amazing because I've been building solutions in languages that I have no idea about. I've never used it. I've built Swift applications. I've been using Rust a lot. I have never written a single line of code using Rust. But with the help of Claude, I've been able to create amazing things. And actually, I've used it in a way where I've also said, can you explain this to me? And I shared context and said, here's my background. Here's what I know. Now teach me this. Explain what actually happens here. And it's an amazing thing. But it is an active choice. You need to make that active choice. You need to spend the time. I'm a big fan of something called compound engineering. How many of you have heard about compound engineering? None. Great. Well, good thing you came to my talk. There's a company called Every in the US. How many of you heard about Every? None. Okay, great. You should check them out. They write really, really good articles about the world we're living in now, building solutions with the help of AI. But they coined the term compound engineering. And the concept is very simple. I want my AI to improve over time. I don't want to continuously experience the same mistakes over and over and over again. So we want to work together with the AI in a way where it compounds over time. And how do we do that? Well, that's what I'm going to try to teach you through my tips today. But the simplest thing we do is essentially to ask our AI to learn from its mistakes. It's not technical at all. It's just about actually telling the AI to learn from its mistakes. Never do this ever again. Reflect on what we just did now. This rabbit hole that we just spent a long time debugging, I never ever want to experience it ever again. And it's actually as simple as that. Just say that along those words to your AI. There's more to it, of course. The biggest tip that I think actually, honestly, most people haven't yet fully understood is that you can just ask Claude or replace it with your favorite coding harness. You can just ask about almost anything. The guy on the screen here is Boris, the creator of Claude Code. And I had the pleasure of having a conversation with him a few months ago. And it sort of clicked with me when he started saying, every time I said, when do you think it's going to be possible to do this? When do you think it's going to be possible to do this? And then he sort of just always gave the answers like, well, you can do that now. You just ask Claude. And I was like, oh, that's easy for you. And then I was like, I went home and I started just always reminding myself of his point, just ask Claude. And if you start making a habit of that, you'll be surprised by what is possible. And I think you can do the same with any of the state-of-the-art thinking models, really. But remember that, ask Claude. If you are, since you saw the audience is a bit divided, some of you are already well into this and some of you are just getting started, my biggest sort of getting started tip is to ask Claude. I'm just getting started. I'm still writing my code myself. Tell me 5 things you can help me with, or give me 5 tips on how we can start collaborating better. Just invite it in as someone you're collaborating with, rather than just thinking of it as sophisticated autocomplete. We are well past sophisticated autocomplete. To me, it's really all about mindset. So let's go. 10 tips. These are the categories. I will race through a lot of slides. So fasten your seatbelts and enjoy the ride. First tip, context is king. And I think above all, it's the most important part when we work with AI, is that the AI cannot read our mind. It does not know our preferences, our taste, unless we tell it to. And we should be smart about guiding the AI. Even though models are now becoming better and better, we can be more and more lazy in how we prompt. Last year, everyone talked about prompt engineering. To be honest with you, you don't actually have to over-engineer how you talk to AI. Keep it simple. The models are incredibly smart these days. But it's beneficial to guide the AI with context. If you know you're going to work in this part of the code base, you don't want to waste tokens on the AI actually exploring all of the code base. It will do that. It will figure it out. But you can, of course, also point it in the direction. At references for files. And remember, these models are not limited to text input. You don't need to explain everything in a prompt with text. Yes, you can talk your prompt if you want to, but you can also use visual capabilities of these models, which means that we can take a screenshot, we can even draw on the screenshot, annotate the screenshot. So instead of us saying, make that button down there on the page bigger, or change this, do that, well, why don't we just show the AI what we mean? Make use of those capabilities. I think it's a missed opportunity for a lot of people because we sort of end up just thinking we have to chat our way to everything. We don't. Context is king, but it's also a precious resource. Now, we've got bigger context windows. With the latest models like Opus, we have now 1 million tokens in the window. For the past year or so, we've sort of been at 200,000 tokens. So 1 million is a significant increase in capacity, right? But keep in mind, when the glass, the context window, I like to present it as a glass, when this glass fills up, eventually it will overflow. And what happens when it overflows? Well, all of these harnesses have built-in auto-compaction, so they will sort of magically make the glass last longer and longer. But don't allow that to happen, is my advice for you. Keep an active view on how much context you're using, because what we've seen, and there's no like hard and fast numbers here, but once you approach sort of 70-80% of the capacity, we do see a clear deterioration of quality in the output. Models, just like us, will start to get confused. And if we end up in a situation where the glass fills up and it actually starts auto-compacting, we are at risk of losing valuable information, unless we take control of the compaction. So my tip for you is fresh glass, new context every time you finish a task. If you do have a more complex task, make use of sub-agents to get even more context, because each sub-agent has their own context window. So we can essentially have endless context if we orchestrate it the right way. And if you are running into the point where you see your context window filling up, make sure that you take control of compaction. Either ask Claude to summarize the progress so far into a file, and then start a new chat, or any coding agents, not just Claude, and start a new chat, and then ask it to continue from where we left things off. It's a very easy way. Make it into a slash command or a skill, and you don't even have to type it, right? Just make a habit out of controlling your context. It's a precious resource. You can keep an eye on it. For instance, in Claude Code, we can do /context. You can also do /status line and say, show me a visual representation of my context window as a battery indicator, for instance. And all of a sudden, you have a visual indicator on your status line. Makes it very easy to see that, oh, I'm starting to hit that 70% point. I should probably start thinking about compacting or continuing in a new session. I hope that makes sense. Remember that the context window is not just your prompt, it's everything that Claude does or your agent does, every response you get. And it's, of course, also all of your tool definitions, all of your rules, your Claude MD or your agent's MD, and it's also any skills that you load up. And just be aware if your agent auto-compacts, it will refill the glass with your Claude MD, will refill the glass with your tool definitions, so your MCPs, but it will not fill all of your skill definitions. It will only refill the invoked skills. So that's a thing to be aware of. Manage your context. Use rules. Of course, this is the highest and most important starting point if you want to achieve compound engineering, if you want your agents to become better and better with you, to learn from your ways of working. you need to start actively managing rules. In addition, now all the latest models also have, or harnesses, also have what we call memory. I would say memory is improving and getting better and better, but I would not sort of fully rely on memory alone. So take an active ownership of rules, and make sure that you ask Claude to learn from its mistakes, right? This is where it will learn. It will add it to the Claude MD file or agents MD file, and or it will add it to your memory. Keep your Claude MD or your agent MD files trimmed and updated. It's not a one-off thing. Don't go online and search for the best agents MD file or the best Claude MD file. So many people do that. The best Claude MD file or agents MD file are the files that you create together with your coding agent, where you teach it your repository, your style, your preferences. And make use of the tools we have. So for instance, use /init to create a starting point. And then just talk your way through what you prefer, what your preferences are. Actively manage your rules. Don't do it as a one-off thing. Actually, I also want to recommend to each and every one of you that you actually throw away your Claude MD file, or at the very least, ask your agents to completely review your Claude MD files or your agents MD files when we have a new model. Most people don't do that. The problem is, I asked ChatGPT to try to help me make a visual representation. I don't know if it makes sense, but I like to think of the models as these huge brains. And then we have scaffolding around the brain. The simplest form of scaffolding is our Claude MD or our agents MD. Essentially, a file where we compensate for the maybe inabilities or lacks of context for our models. So essentially, we say, don't do this, do this. When you do this, you do these steps, etc., etc. Right? That's scaffolding. But as models improve and we get a new model, we actually might risk that the scaffolding that we put in place that worked yesterday is actually holding back the potential of our models. So I would urge you to try that. Actually strip away the scaffolding, the rules, and essentially the harness, and see if the model can actually do things in a new way. And at the very least, ask your model to review its rules. You can say to Claude, can you review my Claude MD file and propose anything that we should trim, optimize, remove, or add? Don't leave it from last year when you maybe added a bunch of stuff that we had to because the models were not as strong as they are today. Hope that makes sense. I think it's a missed opportunity. And lastly, remember, we can be smart about prompting and giving instructions to AI, not just for coding, but in particular for coding. We can start with the lazy prompt, and then we can simply say, what more information do you need from me? What context is missing for you to give me a great answer or produce the best possible outcome? Interview me, ask me questions. So instead of us overthinking, instead of us over-engineering prompts, start with the stupid, simple prompt and ask your AI to interview you, to extract the information that it needs for the best possible outcome. How many of you use skills? Okay, so a lot of you, but also a lot of you don't. There's one thing when people ask me, what should I learn in 2026? My answer is you should invest in skills. It is probably one of the most important yet simple things we can do to teach our AI our ways of working, to teach our preferences, and to give our coding assistants new capabilities. Skills is, in essence, a markdown file with instructions. But more than just markdown files, they can also do very sophisticated things, and it can help us achieve deterministic behavior from an LLM, which is, of course, by definition, a non-deterministic in its behavior. Because we can bundle in code or scripts in skills. So in its simplest form, yes, it's a markdown file, but that markdown file can also reference other files. We can bundle templates, we can bundle helper scripts, and we can do incredible things with skills. The reason why I say everyone should invest in skills is that they are not locked to any single provider. So even though maybe today my answer would be, yeah, Claude Code is my favorite and is the best, that answer might change in 1 month, 2 months, 6 months. I don't know. But the whole industry has said MCP is a good idea, and the whole industry has said skills is a good idea. So everyone's starting to support it, which means it's portable, which means that we are no longer locked to one ecosystem. So invest in skills. Skills and slash commands are sort of now the same thing, in my world at least. Every skill is also a slash command, unless we say that we don't want it to be a slash command. And remember, you can do pretty advanced things with skills and slash commands. You can chain them together. You can also do context injection in the skill and in the slash command, like we see here with the exclamation mark. So here we actually define a skill. We use this exclamation mark to run a command, and the output of the command actually becomes part of the skill. So now we can essentially pre-inject before the LLM actually uses the skill, which is very powerful for some advanced workflows. As I said, you can also chain skills together. I would recommend you sort of break down skills into smaller pieces rather than have sort of a Mwamba big skill that tries to do everything. It's better to have expert skills for specific tasks, and then you can chain them together. And you can have a skill that references other skills as well. The best way to write a skill, in my opinion, is to show and do it together with your coding assistant. So essentially do the work. And then once you're happy with the work, you say, now let's turn this into a skill. Because then we've shown our agent how to do something. We've given feedback, we've given corrections, we've guided it to a process that we're happy with. And then you just say, let's turn it into a repeatable skill. My rule of thumb, if you do something more than once, it probably deserves to become a skill. Think about that the next time you work together with your coding agent. Quick note on invocation of skills. Skills are supposed to automatically invoke based on the description that so we should invest in good descriptions for skills. That's what the AI reads. When we fill the glass, it will be filled with the name of all skills, and we will be filled with the description. And then we progressively load the rest of the skill. So we don't have all the information about the skill in the glass to try to preserve or to manage context. So the description is important because when the AI is given a task by us, it will look at its tools and its skills, and it will say, is there any relevant tools or skills that can help me solve this problem that the user has given me? But that doesn't always work, and it doesn't always happen. So it's a bit of a fiddly thing. So if you want to ensure that it always invokes, you can use something called disable model invocation and say that I want to always manually invoke a skill myself. So that's a little argument you can put in your front matter of the skill. And then the flip side, you can also say that this skill should only be invoked by the model and never by the user. Should not come up as a slash command. So I should want to hide it from the user. And then you put this user invocable false in your front matter. But the tip is actually, if you do want the model to invoke it and you want it to happen every time, you also add it to your Claude MD or Agents MD file. So essentially say, here are the most important skills. Always use these skills when this and this and this happen. So yeah, it's a bit of a duplication, but it, according to benchmarks, significantly increases and we can achieve 100% invocation. All right, rushing on. For any task, we should always start by making a plan. I would assume those of you who are using coding agents are familiar with the concept of plan mode. And if not, I would urge you to always use plan mode in your favorite AI coding agent before you start on a task. And this can also be a way for us to allow our agent to safely explore the code base, because plan mode is a read-only mode. So essentially, when we enter plan mode, the agent is prohibited from actually changing things. So we're essentially going into a safe exploration mode. And nowadays, all models will essentially interview us. When we enter in plan mode, they will automatically make use of the tools that they have for getting user feedback. So in Claude, we have the Ask User Question tool, and it will formulate questions to help get the most possible information required to create the best possible plan. Just like we would when we engineer, when we create solutions, we think it through, and that's what essentially we want the AI to do as well. If you're still not there where you're sort of letting AI agents do this for you, I would urge you to at least use your AI chat, whatever that is, and essentially describe what you want to do and ask the AI to come up with a plan. That is also powerful. And then you can take that plan and you can feed it into a coding agent if you want to. Just having that thought process. Always start with a plan. I would say that as we move away from writing the code ourselves, we need to invest more time in describing and defining what we want the AI to build and how we want it to build it. This is where we are still in control. So if we invest in a good plan, agents are able to one-shot increasingly what we're asking for, as long as we are specific in our plan. There are many frameworks for this. A lot of people, of course, use PRDs. We have had a sort of an upswing in frameworks like SpecKit, etc. To be honest with you, I don't really care what approach. The whole point is just to invest in describing the steps and the plan, not just the scope of what we want to achieve, but also the architecture and essentially the implementation plan. The more we invest in that, the better the outcome, is my experience. We need to, well, as AI does more and more of our job, I think what we are at least left with is our judgment, our taste, our preference, right? So that's essentially what we want to instill in the AI. Our guidance, our hard-earned lessons of what pitfalls to avoid, of how to approach a problem and not approach a problem. But it also comes with a little bit of a danger, because as developers, we tend to have blinders on. We're sort of trained to solve things this way. We're trained to be aware of the frameworks we're aware of. And if we are, I say we should be specific, but at the same time be aware. If you are too specific with AI, you might risk the AI just going down that path and not exploring other pathways. Sometimes it can actually be beneficial to hold back on your preferences, at least at the beginning. This is not just for building, this is for any use of AI, because AI has a tendency to very quickly agree with us. You are absolutely right, right? So if you prompt it and say, I'm thinking this and this and this and this, what do you think? It will typically say, that's a great idea. And then it will sort of just go down that path. So instead, hold back can open up new opportunities, new ways of solving problems that maybe we are blinded by our hard-earned lessons, right? Does that make sense? Okay. One philosophical slide I've been thinking a lot about. That is, we have built tools and processes around a world where writing code was the scarce resource. It was the expensive resource. It was essentially the bottleneck of solving problems, right? And now, I mean, we can argue and agree or disagree that coding is solved. I'm not going to go that far and say that, since a lot of you, a very few of you said that you no longer write code. But anyways, I guess we can agree that it's moving in a direction where it's becoming better and better and better, and we're getting more and more comfortable with it doing a larger part of our job. So let's just for a second think that now the bottleneck that used to be the main bottleneck that we did design tools and processes around because that was the bottleneck, let's assume that bottleneck is no longer the bottleneck. Let's assume coding is solved. Right now, we still have the same tools, the same processes. We still optimize for coding being the bottleneck. But as that bottleneck now increasingly becomes solved, what happens is actually that the bottleneck moves out in both directions. So for me, the human bottleneck is actually being able to keep up with feeding the AI enough work to do. Describing what we want. Sharing our preferences. Designing and thinking becomes the first human bottleneck. And then on the other side, evaluation, validation, feedback, testing becomes a bottleneck. So I would urge you to think about that, not only for coding, but especially for coding right now, since we're all developers. Should we then keep the tools and the processes that were put in place in a world where we didn't have this capability of writing code with AI? Or should we start also rethinking the tools and the processes? Do we need the same processes that we have today? Maybe not. And I would encourage you to start chasing the new bottlenecks in your team as individuals, but also in your team, and start sharing the learnings from it. One way to address these two bottlenecks that I've started on is essentially how do I ensure that that plan that the AI generates in that long-ass markdown file is not just something that I'm like, yeah, that looks good, I'm just accept. Have any of you ever done that? Like, had the AI create a very long markdown file and you're like, okay, probably okay. We want to stay in the loop. We want to be the human in the loop. But in order to do that, we need to find ways that engage us, that makes it easy for us to stay in the loop. And instead of asking the AI to do markdown, which is the default way that it will output, you can very easily ask it to produce an HTML file instead. This has been obviously very popular online over the last couple of months. But it's amazing that you can actually just simply ask Claude to, instead of writing that markdown file, present it to me in a easy to digest, interactive way. You can even say, give me ways to provide you feedback. And all of a sudden, we move from reading a long text document to actually having an interactive experience where we can look at architecture visually. We can look at design proposals. We can look at directions, choices that maybe we became lazy about over the past sort of 6 months. Take control, take back control, and use HTML as one means. There are many frameworks, as I said, and also one thing that has become quite popular is a plugin called Superpowers. Any of you tried Superpowers? Few of you. It's a very token-hungry plugin, fair warning. It can be overkill, for sure, but you can also choose to not run the whole process. It's essentially a number of different skills that are chained together. But I would urge you to test it out. Maybe on something greenfield, maybe on like a full feature. My personal favorite of the process is what's called the brainstorming skill. And what's amazing about that skill, and maybe you just want to only use that skill and maybe save the rest, but just use that skill. What happens is if you give your coding agent, Claude or Codex or whatever, that skill, it will all of a sudden say, it will obviously interview you, it will ask you a lot of questions, it will extract your information for whatever you want, your taste, your preferences, but it will also do something amazing, which is, hey, in order to get your input on this, it might be easier to show it to you. Would you be okay if I spin up a web server? And the first time that happened to me, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then it actually gave me an interactive HTML where it says, here's one way we can do this, but here's another way. What do you want to go with? And I can click, and it goes back to Claude. Or I can also say, yeah, well, actually, let's do another one. I didn't like any of these. So taking control of that bottleneck instead of just handing it over fully, remain the human in the loop. It's incredible. It will use it for design, of course, but it will also use it for architecture, explaining things that might be difficult to explain just in written text. HTML is super powerful. I think we underestimate the things we can do with something simple as HTML. The other side of the bottleneck, as I said, is, of course, once it's built something, does it work? Is it what we asked for? Is it according to our spec, according to our implementation plan? Superpowers also takes care of this side, so you can test it. But the great thing with these things is I wouldn't just go online and find all of these skills. The best ones are actually the ones where you say, I kind of like the concept here. Can you now help me create my version of it? Because then you can fully control it, right? You can just give an example to your coding agent. Superpowers, I've heard a lot of things about that. I want to make my version of the brainstorming skill, and it will help you do that. But as Boris says, maybe the biggest sort of leverage thing we can do with our AI coding assistants is to think like this. If I want my AI agent to do the work that I do, I also need to think that it needs the same tools that I need for my job, right? So if I want it to do all of these steps, I need to think, can I provide it with the same tools that I use to do that job? Tools and context, right? So MCPs is, of course, one way for us to give it access to extracting context. But, of course, we can also use it to give it access to tools where it can actually perform actions. One example of that is, of course, giving it access to a browser or a computer, which comes with risks, I know, but it sort of allows us to do pretty amazing things. So giving it access to Chrome, there are many ways to do this. There's a built-in Chrome plugin in Claude. In Codex, you have a built-in browser, and you can, of course, also use MCPs like the Chrome DevTools MCP, which is a really great one as well, which not only allows you to interact with the browser or the agent, but it also allows it to interact with the Chrome DevTools console, essentially, to look at network traffic and all of these things. It's a really powerful way to say to your agent when it says, yeah, now it's up and running, you just need to test it and let me know if you need to change anything. You just say, no, you just do that. Don't ask me to do it. You can do it. Use /Chrome. This obviously, again, can take some time, but that's fine, right? Because we can continue doing something else while that's running. So give it ways to verify its own work. How many of you heard of agentation? None. Okay. I love when no one says yes, because then I can at least give you something in my talk. Agentation is actually a very simple thing. It's a skill that you can give to Claude or any coding agent. And this one was built for Next.js apps. So essentially, it's a way where it will inject into your app a overlay menu bar, essentially. And for local testing, I can then click on that menu bar and I can start interacting with the DOM elements. And I can start actually annotating and provide feedback, right? Because this is where I can now actually click around and mark things. I can even draw on things, but it will have complete access to the DOM. And it ends up as a prompt that I can just paste back into my coding assistant. So I can essentially just test through and give my feedback. And you can even talk your feedback. But it's built for Next.js, but you can just ask Claude, right? So maybe you're not using Next.js. You just point to agentation and say, hey, Claude, can we do something? Can you help me build a tool like this for our stack, for this solution? And 5 minutes later, Claude has built that tool no one has bothered building for you, but now it built it for you. So remember, we can actually ask Claude for a lot of things. Pointing it in the direction, give it inspiration, and ask it to solve it for your problem. Recently, over the past sort of month, we've also moved from thinking about sort of describing what we want, but becoming more outcome-based. So essentially, both Codex and Claude Code have this /goal command, which allows us to essentially engage longer running agents, where it will have a separate agent that evaluates, have we reached the goal? If not, we will run another loop. So this is, of course, an important step where we are not just sort of getting mediocre results or where the agent becomes lazy and says, I'm done, when it's not actually done. We can instead use the /goal command, and it will essentially run loops until the criteria has been completed, evaluated not by the main agent itself, but a separate agent. This tip used to be use the right model, but I changed it. Use the best model. I mean, and well, when you're paying for your tokens, I guess I have to moderate it a little bit. But honestly, the best models are just so much better than the next best models that the time or the money you might save from using a lesser model, I think you will very quickly gain in the time that you need to go fix, do several iterations, as opposed to actually being able to solve the problem immediately on one run with the best models. But of course, you need to obviously think about what to achieve and what sort of the task at hand is. But there is a reason why obviously the people making these models are recommending us to use the most expensive models. But I would also very much support the argument that the quality is so much better when we use the state-of-the-art models, that I would argue you should argue with your employer and say we will save so much just by using a bit more tokens. In reality, throwing more tokens gives better results. That's just how it is. So now you're the manager and he's arguing. Great. Now I told you, okay? For context, as I mentioned earlier, remember subagents have their own context window, which means that we can essentially engineer endless context windows. We can delegate to subagents. We can have predefined subagents. So that's obviously useful when we have certain specialist tasks that we want to reuse. Then we can define subagents. But we don't have to do that. We can also say to our coding agent, use subagents to solve this, right? For instance, loop over all of these files, use subagents, and then it will actually parallelize the task. It will split it up into batches, and they will work independently of each other. Use one agent to do this, another agent to do this, and then they will both report back to the main agent. Thing to know is that we can also define in skills, for instance, that a skill should use a subagent, and we can also say that it should fork the context. So there's an argument we can put in our skill, which is context : fork. And by doing that, we're essentially taking the context window from the main thread, and we're passing it into the subagent, so that the subagent holds all the information that we had in the main thread. And then it will eventually report back to the main thread once it's completed, right? So that's a little trick that you can use. And remember, you can also chain subagents together as well. Say, first do this, then use the output from that as input to the next step in the chain. Hooks. How many of you have used hooks? Okay, not so many. Hooks is our way, our guardrail. Right? This is where we can actually make sure that we don't just cross our fingers and hope that the agent reads the agent MD file and listens to our command, which says, never, ever, ever do this. And then sometimes it might still do it. So hooks allows us to essentially perform actions outside of inference. And there's a long list of events that we can have trigger hooks. Maybe one of the most powerful and most important ones for you would be before tool use. Because that allows us to essentially say when the LLM tries to do a tool call, we can essentially stop and check and run logic and make sure that it's trying to do something that we are okay with. For instance, we can very easily prevent it from using RM just by having a hook. You can also say in your Claude MD file or agent MD file that you're not allowed to use RM, but that is not the guardrail. There is no guarantee. But a hook allows you to have a guarantee. Yeah, hooks can also be used for a lot of other things, and interestingly, we can have hooks inside of skills as well. So you want to get started with hooks, then ask your coding agent. Someone told me I should start using hooks. Give me 5 examples of where we could benefit from hooks in our code base, in the way we work together. And it will give you good answers. There's a long list of different events. This is just sort of the key ones, but there are many more. So you can really have a fine-grained control over the entire agent loop and then have logic. You can also do, like, a lot of this is about security and guardrails, but you can also use it for instance, every time it's touched this file, we want it to run automatically a linter, for instance. You can do that as well. You can, of course, achieve that by telling the agent to always do it, but then again, it doesn't always do it, right? So a hook enforces behavior deterministically. How many of you have heard about Ralph Wiggum? Not just the Simpson character. Yeah. This was obviously a very big trend earlier this year. Whole point was we're essentially saying we can run agents for a very long time. And essentially, it's like what we talked about earlier, give it a goal and let it run until it achieved the goal. In essence, we can achieve a Ralph Wiggum loop without all the additional things that maybe is included in skills, just by simply doing a hook. And the hook is very simple. On completion, the hook will just prompt back continue. That's the definition of a Ralph Wiggum loop. Essentially, just keep going. No, you're not done yet. The newer models now are sort of becoming more and more self-aware of this, and they're trying, like the latest Opus model. One of the biggest improvements here was that it will not as frequently claim that it's done before it's done, which a lot of models have done up until now. They've sort of been saying, yeah, I'm done. Well, you've only done 15 of the 20 things we agreed you should do. Oh, sorry, and then you can. But now it's sort of automatically doing that. But hooks can essentially keep the agent going as well. As I said in my introduction, I'm very passionate about compounding, and I really want my AI to become better and better and better. And I don't want to keep saying the same things over and over and over again. So very simply, what I do is I ask my AI to reflect on what we've done together, to learn from its mistakes. And instead of me typing that out every time, I just put it in a skill or a / command, and I essentially use that every time I end the session. And you will see that this adds up over time. You need to consider whether or not you want the learnings to also be shared in Git, which you may want, right? Because if you experience a rabbit hole and you do a long debugging session and you finally figured it out after the agent made the same mistake 5 times, and they're like, okay, done, we fixed it. Then maybe you want to be nice to your colleagues and help them so that they avoid the same situation. So maybe learnings is something we should share in Git. If we put the learnings in the Claude MD file, the Claude MD file can become quite large, which we don't want. So we might want to have like a learnings MD file or even like rule files. And then our Claude MD file can point to it. I would check in both of them. Both of those files, they are project knowledge. They are workflows. You do want the rest of the team to have the same learnings and benefits, right? We can also ask our AI to look at our code base and essentially extract patterns. We can use it for documentation, but well, maybe we don't need documentation in the same extent as we have been for many years. Maybe we need to rethink what documentation is actually for. But patterns is an interesting one because we can ask our AI to explore our code base, to identify patterns, coding styles, and all of these things. And now we can also ask our AI to turn it into skills so that we can actually enforce behavior, right? So we can essentially have skills for how we write tests. We can have skills for how we do pull requests. We can have skills for how we do reviews. So there are so many things we can turn into skills, repeatable patterns and processes, which I would really urge you to do. What's really great, and maybe a lesser known fact, I'll actually pause this for a second. How many of you have ever used /insights in Claude? 3 hands. Okay, I'm so happy because this is like all of you just need to go back home and run that command. /insights. Behind any coding harness, we actually have session data. So your codex, your Claude code, they store the sessions persisted to file. Typically in your root home folder under .claude, and then you will find all of your sessions. And we can point our agent to those files, and we can say, can you now look at how we work together? And then tell me what we do well and what we can improve on. And /insights gives you a report. It will explain to you where you typically give the same commands over and over and over again, which is a great opportunity for you to turn it into a skill. It will say where things went wrong, and it will propose ways for you to avoid those things, either by updating your Claude MD file. And it provides you with a simple copy. So you can essentially just click it and paste it into Claude or your agent, and it will update the rules. This is your secret sauce to compounding. And it actually tells you how you can become better with your coding agent. It will suggest hooks to avoid sort of common errors, right? And it will actually give you the configuration. You might need to put that configuration in yourself because there are safety mechanisms that disallows the agent from changing its own settings, which is probably good, but it's very simple. Use /insights, compound, and become better with your AI. Every iteration you should think, what can we learn from this, and what can we do better the next time? What can we save time on? And it's as simple as asking your agent. Reflect on what we've done together today and learn from your mistakes. Simple, but very, very powerful. Use tools when you have them, but I would say be careful about putting in too many tools. I've done a lot of training sessions, and I've done training on skills, and I've had people say, when I said, have you used skills? And one person said, yes, I installed all the skills. I was like, whoa, what do you mean all the skills? Yeah, every skill he found in the marketplace. Don't do that. Also, MCPs are great for sort of collective knowledge, for use cases. But actually, as developers, I would lean towards CLI tools when there are CLI tools, both for context preservation. Like, for instance, the GitHub MCP. It's a great MCP, but it has something like 70 tools. If you just add that MCP, you load 70 tool definitions into your context, into your glass, before you've even said, hi, Claude. And how many of those 70 tools do you think you use? Maybe 2, 3, 4 of those tools frequently. So be conservative about the tools you add and the tools you need. It's better to say, hey, Claude, you have access to GH. And Claude will figure it out. Claude can use the CLI, and Codex can use the CLI, right? And Copilot can use the CLI. So those are the tools we typically use. But be cautious, right? Because if you have logged in, I heard someone say this yesterday, actually. If you have on your command line logged into your Azure and you have the Azure CLI there, that means that your coding agent also has access to that Azure CLI, which means it can do all the things you can do as well. So just be aware what tools you give it access to. All right, tip number 9, release the agents. So this is where I would say, when you go from autocomplete to actually experiencing that the agents can actually produce runnable code. We can argue if it's beautiful or if it's optimal, but it's become better and better and better. You get to the point where you sit and wait. because you sort of give a task to the AI, and it takes time. They can spend minutes and minutes and minutes, and sometimes even like 20 minutes on a task or more, right? So there's a finite number of coffee cups we can drink while we wait for AI. Or maybe not. I don't think it's healthy. So of course we could spend the time, go do something else, and go out and touch grass and get fresh air. But the great thing is, of course, we can start then parallelizing. We can actually do more, because we don't have to sit and wait. We can just start a new session. We can start a new piece of work. And that's where sort of I became the bottleneck, because I couldn't keep up. My sweet spot right now is 7 agents running at all times on one screen. And then I do have a few other background agents. But that's sort of where my cognitive load sort of hits the limit. I can't really keep up with it productively. It can become quite addictive. My wife hated it when Claude launched remote control, because now I sit in my sofa pretending to watch whatever soap opera she's watching or reality show, and then I'm like, yeah, making sure my agents are productive and working. Joking aside, I think we should actually be a bit cautious of this, because it can actually be addictive. It's exciting to begin with, but then maybe we should find a little balance. But there are many ways to become productive. Now we have sort of native built-in support for work trees, which allows us to actually run in one single repository many tasks at the same time that might have previously been a bit difficult to do, because it will conflict with the code, etc. So these are some ways to do that with Claude Code. The Superpowers plugin also has a work tree skill, so you can give it to Codex or other agents that don't necessarily have the same built-in tool functionalities. Remember that everything we do with our agents is essentially a session, and since it is persisted to a file, it means that we can continue a session, right? So we can actually we can go home for the day. We don't have to wait for it to complete always, and we can actually continue later on by just using the resume function in our session. So use work trees. I would highly recommend, if you use GitHub, that you give your agent access to GitHub, because then you can essentially also allow it to both create issues, read issues, get that as context, and also perform tasks for you, right? So I do, like every night I go to brush my teeth, I will just send off a couple of comments on GitHub issues and say, @Claude, fix this. And then I see how many can it do before I finish brushing my teeth. So that's a little game that I have. Surprisingly, it's working really well. Remote control is another way. I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to rush through this. Remember that our agents can also be used for automation. And both in Codex and in Claude Code, we have the ability to schedule. Essentially, the agent, what makes it possible to do this is that they've given the agents a cron tool, and they just packaged it up as something called /loop and /schedule, or routines in the world of Claude. And it allows us to have running scheduled tasks or loops on our computer, for instance, but of course, they are then reliant on our computer being turned on. They will not run if we turn off our computer. But for those cases, we can also send some of these tasks to the cloud environment. For instance, in Anthropic's case, we can do what we call remote routines or cloud routines, and it will be able to essentially, as long as you have a repository, it will check out the code, and it will run whatever scheduled task you have put in there. So it's a great way for you to automate tasks in teams, and also for your individual use cases. This one is actually really cool. There's a built-in tool in Claude Code called the monitoring tool, and you can say something like, start my dev server and use the monitoring tool to observe for errors. And it will essentially just sit there and listen and monitor, and you can test it, you can run it, you can use it, and whatever issues that happens, it will pick up and it will automatically start fixing it. It's a handy little engineer in your pocket that you can have there helping you do your job. Just last week, and this is like where I need to go in for landing here. Last week, we also got something called dynamic workflows, or Ultra Code, which is really cool, where you can actually, it's very new, so you need to test it out. But what you can do is essentially have Claude, instead of running in one thread and one process and making use of sub-agents, it can actually make a plan and spin up many, like up to 1,000 agents that will actually work independently, report back, and it's something that is resumable as well. So it's essentially where Claude orchestrates all of this, but it's using code outside. So it's essentially building its own little harness on top of the harness. It's really fascinating. Still early days, but you can use it for a lot of interesting things where the task is big. So yeah, remember, you can ask Claude to use Claude in the solutions. This is a missed point for a lot of people, because agents will typically solve things like we developers would. So if you ask it to like take this text and analyze it for sentiment or something, it will write a regexp or whatever we would have done in the old days. But you need to just nudge Claude and say, remember, you can use Claude. And you can also add to your agents MD, remember, you are not human, you are Claude. So that it stops saying, this is a significant piece of work, it will take 4 weeks. And then 5 minutes later, it's done, right? Remember to be the human in the loop, and I'm out of time, so I will end there. My 10 tips. Sorry for a rushed ending there, but thank you so much for attending. Add me on LinkedIn. Follow my humble little YouTube channel where I post a lot of stuff about Claude Code, and I'll stick around for questions if there are any. Thank you so much.